The phone call came at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. He was sitting on his couch halfway through a bowl of reheated pasta when his phone lit up with an unknown number. Something in his gut told him to answer it immediately. "Is this Mr. Kumar?" a calm professional voice asked. "This is County General Hospital. Your wife asked us to call you. She's here in our emergency department." The drive to the hospital felt like it took both seconds and hours at the same time. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. Traffic lights blurred together. Red, green, yellow. None of it mattered. The only thing running through his mind was getting to her. When he finally reached the hospital, the fluorescent lights in the parking lot buzzed overhead like angry insects. The automatic door slid open with a mechanical whoosh, and the smell of antiseptic and floor cleaner hit him immediately. Hospitals all smell the same, he thought. Clean, but not in a good way. Clean in a way that makes you nervous. The receptionist pointed him toward the third floor. "Neurology wing," she said without looking up from her computer screen. "Take the elevator to your right." His heart hammered against his ribs as the elevator climbed. Each floor dinged softly. First floor, second floor, third floor. The doors opened to reveal a long, empty corridor. The lights here were even brighter, almost painful to look at directly. Everything was white. White walls, white floors, white ceiling tiles with little black dots. That's when he saw her. She was standing about 50 feet down the hallway, leaning against the wall like she didn't have the strength to hold herself up anymore. Her back was pressed flat against the cold surface, her head tilted slightly to one side. She looked smaller than he remembered, more fragile, like a strong wind could blow her away. He started walking faster, then jogging, then running. "Hey," he called out, his voice echoing in the empty hallway. She turned her head slowly toward him. Her face was pale, almost gray under the harsh lights. Dark circles hung beneath her eyes like bruises. When she saw him, her lips moved, forming his name, but barely any sound came out, just a whisper, soft, desperate, tired. "I'm here," he said, reaching her and immediately wrapping his arms around her shoulders. "I'm here now." "What happened?" She leaned into him, all her weight pressing against his chest. "I couldn't see," she whispered. "I was driving home from work and suddenly everything went blurry. Like someone smeared Vaseline across my eyes. I pulled over and then the pain started." "What kind of pain?" "Like someone was hitting the inside of my skull with a hammer. Over and over. I couldn't think. Couldn't breathe. I called an ambulance. A door opened down the hall and a doctor emerged. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with reading glasses hanging from a chain around his neck. His expression was professional but not unkind. "Mr. and Mrs. Kumar?" he asked, approaching them. "I'm Dr. Patel. We've been running some tests on your wife. Why don't we step into the consultation room?" The consultation room was small and windowless. 3 chairs, a desk, and a light box on the wall for viewing x-rays. The doctor gestured for them to sit, but neither of them wanted to. Sitting felt like accepting something terrible. As long as they stood, maybe the news wouldn't be real. "Your wife has been experiencing severe migraines," Dr. Patel began, pulling out a folder thick with papers. "She also reported vision problems, dizziness, and difficulty concentrating over the past few weeks. Is that correct?" She nodded slowly. "I thought it was just stress from work. I've been pulling long hours. We performed a CT scan," the doctor continued, his voice careful and measured, "and we found something concerning. There's a mass in your brain, right here." He pointed to a scan on the light box to a small white blob that looked wrong against the gray swirls of brain tissue. The room went silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy and thick like you're underwater. He felt her hand grip his, her fingers cold and trembling. "A mass?" he finally managed to say. "You mean like a tumor?" "We need to do more tests to confirm exactly what it is," Dr. Patel said. "But yes, that's what it appears to be. I've scheduled an MRI for tomorrow morning. That will give us much clearer images and help us understand what we're dealing with." "Is it cancer?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We can't know that until we do the MRI and possibly a biopsy, but I want to be honest with you both. This needs to be addressed soon. Depending on what the MRI shows, surgery might be necessary." "Surgery? Brain surgery?" The words hung in the air like smoke. They sat in that small room for another 20 minutes while Dr. Patel explained procedures and possibilities and percentages. but he barely heard any of it. All he could focus on was her hand in his and how it wouldn't stop shaking. When they finally left the consultation room, she stopped in the hallway, the same spot where she'd been standing when he first arrived. She pressed her back against the wall again and closed her eyes. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know," he said, though his own fear was so big he could barely breathe around it. "But we're going to figure this out. Together. You hear me? Together." She opened her eyes and looked at him. Really looked at him, the way she used to when they first met. Back when the world felt full of possibilities instead of problems. "Promise me something," she said. "Anything. Promise me you won't give up. No matter what happens. No matter what they tell us tomorrow." He pulled her close, feeling her heart beating against his chest, fast and frantic like a bird trying to escape a cage. "I promise," he said into her hair. "I promise." They stood there for a long time, two people pressed against a hospital wall, holding on to each other like they were the only solid things left in the world. Nurses walked past. Machines beeped in distant rooms. Life continued around them, but in that moment, nothing else existed except the two of them and the weight of what they now had to face. The MRI was scheduled for 7 a.m. the next morning. They had 12 hours to wait. 12 hours to imagine every possible outcome. 12 hours to pretend that everything might still be okay. She was admitted overnight for observation. They gave her a room on the 4th floor, small and sterile with a window that looked out over the parking lot. He sat in the chair beside her bed, watching her try to sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, they'd flutter open again moments later, like her brain wouldn't let her rest. Around 2 a.m., she finally spoke into the darkness. "Do you remember our wedding day?" "Of course," he said. "Do you remember what you said to me? Right before we walked down the aisle?" He smiled, even though she couldn't see it in the dark. "I said I'd never leave you, no matter what. I need you to remember that," she whispered. "In case I forget." His throat tightened. "You're not going to forget anything." But even as he said it, he knew he couldn't promise that. He couldn't promise anything anymore. The future that had seemed so certain just 12 hours ago now felt like smoke, impossible to hold on to. Dawn came slowly, turning the sky from black to gray to pale blue. Neither of them had really slept. When the nurse came to take her down for the MRI, he walked beside the gurney, his hand never leaving hers. "I'll be right here when you come out," he said as they reached the imaging department. She looked up at him from the gurney, her eyes red from exhaustion and unshed tears. "I know," she whispered. The doors swung closed between them, and he was left standing in another hallway under another set of fluorescent lights, waiting for answers he wasn't sure he was ready to hear. The MRI took 45 minutes, but it felt like days. He paced the waiting area, counting ceiling tiles, reading the same poster about hand washing at least 20 times, checking his phone every 30 seconds even though he knew no one would call. When they finally wheeled her back out, she looked exhausted. The MRI machine was loud, she told him later, like being inside a drum while someone hits it with hammers. They gave her headphones with music, but it didn't help much. "Results will take a few hours," the technician said. "Dr. Patel will call you when he's reviewed everything." They went home to wait. Their apartment felt different somehow. Same furniture, same walls, same photos hanging in the same spots. But everything looked strange now, like he was seeing it all through dirty glass. This was their life before, and soon it would be their life after. Whatever that meant. She sat on the couch staring at nothing. He made tea that neither of them drank. The silence between them wasn't comfortable anymore. It was full of unasked questions and fears too big to name. The call came at 2:15 p.m. "Can you both come back to the hospital?" Dr. Patel asked. "I'd like to discuss the results in person." The drive back felt different than the night before. Slower, heavier, like they were driving toward something they couldn't escape. This time, the consultation room had more people in it. Dr. Patel was there, along with another doctor he introduced as Dr. Reynolds, a neurosurgeon. The fact that a surgeon was in the room told him everything he needed to know before anyone spoke. "The MRI confirmed our suspicions," Dr. Patel began, pulling up images on a computer screen. "There's a tumor. It's about 3 centimeters in size, located in the left temporal lobe. The good news is that it appears to be benign, not cancer." He felt her exhale beside him, a breath she'd been holding since yesterday. "But," Dr. Reynolds continued, and that one word erased all the relief, Its location and size make it dangerous. It's pressing against important structures. That's what's causing your symptoms. The headaches, the vision problems, the dizziness. If left untreated, it will continue to grow. So what do we do? He asked. Surgery, Dr. Reynolds said simply. We need to remove it. Brain surgery, she said flatly. Yes. It's a delicate procedure, but I've performed this type of operation many times. The tumor is accessible, which is good. But I won't lie to you. There are risks. Anytime we operate on the brain, there are risks. What kind of risks? Her voice was steady, but he could see her hands gripping the armrests of her chair. Dr. Reynolds listed them carefully. Infection, bleeding, damage to surrounding tissue, memory problems, changes in personality, motor function issues. In rare cases, stroke or death. The word sat in the room like a stone. What happens if I don't have the surgery? She asked. The tumor will keep growing. Your symptoms will get worse. Eventually, it could cause seizures, permanent brain damage, or yes, it could be fatal. So it wasn't really a choice at all. They scheduled the surgery for 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to prepare, Dr. Reynolds said. 3 weeks to get affairs in order. 3 weeks to say goodbye, just in case. The parking lot was hot and bright after the dim hospital. He helped her into the car, closed the door, walked around to the driver's side. He put the key in the ignition but didn't start the engine. His hands were shaking too hard. That's when she broke. All the strength she'd been holding on to for the past day crumbled. She made a sound he'd never heard before, something between a sob and a gasp. Like all the air was being forced out of her lungs at once. He was out of the car in seconds, opening her door, pulling her out into his arms. She collapsed against him, her legs giving out. They sank down together right there in the parking lot beside the car. She pressed her face against his shoulder and cried in a way that scared him. Deep, shaking sobs that felt like they were tearing her apart from the inside. I don't want to die, she said between sobs. I'm not ready. We're not ready. You're not going to die, he said, even though he had no right to promise that. You're going to be fine. The doctor said he's done this before. Lots of times. But she kept crying and he kept holding her, and they stayed there in that parking lot until the sun started to set and the air got cooler and her tears finally ran out. The 3 weeks before surgery moved both too fast and too slow. Time became strange, elastic, stretching and compressing in ways that didn't make sense. She made lists. Lots of lists. Things to do, people to call, documents to organize. She updated their will, even though he told her she didn't need to. Just in case, she said. Those 2 words became her mantra. Just in case, she wrote letters. Letters to him for future occasions. For their next anniversary. For his birthday. For Christmas. She sealed them in envelopes and made him promise not to open them unless something went wrong. He hid them in the back of his closet and tried not to think about them. They told their families. Those conversations were the hardest part. Her mother cried on the phone for 30 minutes straight. His father, who never showed emotion, went completely silent. Her younger brother wanted to fly in immediately, but she told him to wait until after the surgery. Save your time off for when I actually need help, she said, trying to sound light and failing. She started recording voice messages on her phone. Random thoughts throughout the day. Stories from her childhood. Her opinion on movies they'd watched. Her recipe for the pasta sauce he loved. So you don't forget my voice, she said when he found her doing it one night. They made a bucket list, but not the kind people usually make. No skydiving or traveling to Paris. Their list was smaller, quieter, more real. They went to the cafe where they had their first date. It was still there 8 years later, with the same chipped tables and the same smell of coffee and cinnamon. They sat in the same corner booth. She ordered the same thing she ordered that first day, a cappuccino with extra foam and a blueberry muffin. I was so nervous that day, she said, smiling at the memory. I spilled coffee on my shirt before you even arrived. Had to run to the bathroom and scrub it out with paper towels. I was nervous too, he admitted. I practiced conversation starters in my car for 15 minutes before coming in. Really? You seem so confident. I'm good at faking it. They walked through their old neighborhood, the one they lived in when they first got married. The tiny apartment with the leaky faucet and the neighbors who fought every night. We were so broke, she said, laughing. Remember eating ramen for dinner 6 days a week? And feeling like we had everything we needed, he added. They drove to the beach at sunset. The water was cold, but she took off her shoes anyway and walked along the edge where the waves met the sand. He took photos of her with the orange sun behind her hair blowing in the wind, her smile real even though her eyes were sad. Promise me something else, she said as they sat on the sand, watching the sun sink into the ocean. What if the surgery changes me? If I'm not the same person after? If I can't remember things or if I act different? Promise me you'll tell me stories about who I was, about who we were. Help me find my way back. You're going to be fine, he said, but she grabbed his hand hard. Promise me. Please, I promise. The night before the surgery, neither of them could sleep. They lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the clock tick. At 3 a.m., he heard her get up. He waited a moment, then followed her. She was standing in the hallway, just standing there in her pajamas, her back pressed against the wall, her eyes closed. Hey, he said softly. What are you doing? She opened her eyes. They were wet with tears. I'm scared, she whispered. Not of dying. I'm scared of waking up different. What if I don't know you? What if I forget everything that makes me who I am? What if the person who wakes up after surgery isn't really me anymore? He walked to her and pressed his forehead against hers. Then I'll remind you. Every single day. I'll tell you about the first time we met. About how you laughed at my terrible jokes. About how you cried during dog food commercials. About how you organize the pantry by color even though it drives me crazy. About every moment we've ever had. I'll tell you until you remember. And if you never remember, I'll keep telling you anyway. She wrapped her arms around him and held on tight. I love you, she whispered. I need you to remember that. No matter what. I love you so much it scares me. I love you too, he said, more than anything. They stood there until the sky started to lighten, until the birds started singing, until they couldn't put it off anymore. The surgery was in 4 hours. They arrived at the hospital at 6 a.m. The pre-op area was busy even that early. Nurses moving efficiently between curtained areas, machines beeping, voices calling out medical terms he didn't understand. She changed into a hospital gown, pale blue and covered in tiny white dots. They gave her compression socks that made her laugh despite everything. Fashion statement, she joked weakly. An anesthesiologist came to explain the process. An IV line was started. Papers were signed. Her mother arrived. Then his parents, then her brother who'd flown in the night before. The small pre-op area became crowded with people trying not to cry. At 6:45, Dr. Reynolds came to check on her one last time. Ready? He asked. She nodded, but her hand squeezed his so hard it hurt. You're going to do great, the surgeon said. I'll see you soon. At 7 a.m. exactly, they came to take her to the operating room. He walked beside the bed as far as they'd let him, which wasn't far enough. Never far enough. At the double doors that said authorized personnel only, he had to stop. She looked up at him from the gurney, her face pale against the white pillow. I'll be right here, he said, his voice breaking. The whole time. And I'll be the first face you see when you wake up. I know, she whispered. Then, I'm not ready. You're the strongest person I know, he told her. You can do this. The doors swung open. The bed started moving. She kept her eyes on his until the doors closed between them, and she disappeared from view. The waiting room became their home for the next several hours. Hard plastic chairs, old magazines nobody read, a TV in the corner playing the news on mute, coffee that tasted like hot cardboard. Her mother sat in the corner crying quietly into tissues. His mother tried to comfort her but ended up crying too. Her brother paced, checking his phone constantly like it might have answers. His father sat perfectly still, staring at nothing. The surgery was supposed to take 6 to 8 hours. Dr. Reynolds had explained they'd shave part of her head, cut through the skull, carefully remove the tumor, then close everything back up. Said like that, it sounded simple, but he couldn't stop imagining her brain exposed, her thoughts and memories and everything that made her who she was, just sitting there vulnerable under bright surgical lights. Hour 1 crawled by, hour 2, hour 3. At hour 4, a nurse came out with an update. Everything's going well. They're making good progress. Dr. Reynolds will give you another update in a couple hours. But hour 5 came and went. Hour 6, hour 7, hour 8. At hour 9, he started to panic. They said 6 to 8 hours. Why was it taking so long? He wanted to ask someone, but there was no one to ask. He paced the hallway outside the waiting room, the same hallway where he'd first found her 3 weeks ago. He put his hand on the wall where she'd been leaning. The spot felt cold under his palm, hour 10, hour 11. At 6:15 p.m., 11 hours and 15 minutes after she'd disappeared through those double doors, Dr. Reynolds finally emerged. His scrubs were wrinkled. His face was tired, but he was smiling slightly, and that small smile made his knees weak with relief. "She's okay," the surgeon said immediately. The surgery was successful. "We removed the entire tumor." The waiting room erupted. Her mother sobbed. Her brother laughed and cried at the same time. His father actually hugged him, something he couldn't remember happening in years. "Why did it take so long?" he asked when the noise died down. "The tumor was more complex than the scans showed," Dr. Reynolds explained. "It had wrapped around some blood vessels. We had to be extremely careful, but we got it all. Clean margins. No complications during the procedure. When can I see her? She's in recovery now. Still unconscious from the anesthesia. We'll keep her there for about an hour, then move her to ICU. You can see her briefly once she's settled there, but she probably won't wake up fully until tomorrow morning." "But she's okay?" "The surgery went as well as it possibly could have. But I need to be honest with you. The next 48 hours are critical. We need to monitor her closely for any signs of swelling, bleeding, or neurological changes. Brain surgery is traumatic even when it goes well. Her brain needs time to recover. But she'll be the same. She'll remember things." Dr. Reynolds hesitated. "We won't know the full extent of any cognitive effects until she wakes up, and we can do assessments. The tumor was in an area associated with memory and language processing. We were as careful as possible, but there may be some changes. We'll know more tomorrow." They moved her to ICU at 7:30 p.m. He was allowed to visit for 15 minutes every hour. The ICU was darker than the rest of the hospital, quieter. Machines beeped and hummed. Nurses spoke in low voices. Her bed was in the corner, surrounded by monitors and IV poles. Her head was wrapped in white bandages. Tubes ran from her arms. A ventilator breathed for her. She looked so small in that bed. So fragile. Nothing like the strong person he knew. He pulled a chair close and took her hand. It was warm but limp. "Hey," he said quietly. "It's me. You did it. The surgery's over. You're okay." No response. Just the steady beep of the heart monitor and the whoosh of the ventilator. "I'm right here," he continued. "Just like I promised. And I'm going to stay right here until you wake up. So take your time, rest, heal, I'll be waiting." He sat there for his 15 minutes, holding her hand, telling her things he wasn't sure she could hear. When the nurse told him his time was up, he kissed her forehead carefully, avoiding the bandages, and whispered, "I love you." The first night was endless. He couldn't leave the hospital, couldn't bear to be far away. He sent their families home and stayed alone in the waiting room. Every hour they'd let him visit for 15 minutes. Every hour she remained unconscious and still. Around 3 a.m., 16 hours after surgery, something changed. During his 3 a.m. visit, he was holding her hand, talking about nothing when he felt it. The smallest movement. Her fingers twitched against his palm. His heart jumped. "Did you see that?" he asked the nurse. She came over to check, reviewing the monitors. "That's a good sign," she said, smiling. "Means the brain is active. Means she's in there trying to come back to you." At 4 a.m., her eyes moved beneath her closed lids. At 5 a.m., she made a small sound. At 6 a.m., just as the sun started to rise outside the ICU windows, her eyes finally opened. Just for a second. Just a brief flutter. But they opened and they looked right at him, and in that moment he saw her. Really her. Still in there. Still fighting. "Welcome back," he whispered, his voice thick with tears. "I've been waiting for you." Her eyes closed again, but this time it felt different. Not the unconsciousness of before, but real sleep. Healing sleep. Her hand squeezed his, weak but deliberate, and he knew. She'd heard him. She knew he was there. The worst was over. But the hard part was just beginning. Part 5. Learning to wait. She woke up fully the next afternoon, 30 hours after surgery. He was there like he'd been there the whole time when her eyes opened and stayed open. "Hey," he said softly, standing up so she could see him better. Her eyes focused on his face. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out at first. Then a whisper. "Water." The nurse brought ice chips. He fed them to her carefully, one at a time, watching her work to swallow. Such a simple thing. Something she'd done thousands of times without thinking. Now it took effort, concentration. "How do you feel?" he asked. She took a long time to answer. "Tired," she finally said. Then, "Head hurts." "That's normal," the nurse assured her. "You just had brain surgery. You're doing great." Over the next few hours, doctors came to assess her. They asked her questions. "What's your name? Where are you? What year is it? Can you squeeze my hand? Can you move your toes? Can you follow this light with your eyes?" She answered most questions correctly. Some took longer than others. Sometimes she'd start to answer, then stop, confused like the words had disappeared mid-sentence. She could move everything, which was good. No paralysis. No obvious motor problems. But something was different. He could feel it even if he couldn't quite name it. The way she looked at him. The pauses before she spoke. The confusion that would cross her face when trying to remember simple words. On day 3, they moved her from ICU to a regular room. Physical therapists came to help her sit up, then stand, then take a few shaky steps. She had to learn to balance again. Her brain had to relearn how to tell her body what to do. "It's like being drunk," she said after one session, exhausted and frustrated. "I know what I want my legs to do, but they won't listen." "It'll come back," the therapist assured her. "Your brain just needs time to heal and create new pathways." On day 5, a neuropsychologist came to do cognitive testing. Memory tests, word association, problem solving, pattern recognition. She struggled with some of them. Could remember her childhood clearly, but had gaps in more recent memories. Could remember they were married, but couldn't remember their wedding date. Could describe their apartment, but couldn't remember what they'd eaten for dinner the night before surgery. "It's called temporal memory impairment," the doctor explained later when she'd fallen asleep. The tumor and the surgery affected areas responsible for forming and retrieving recent memories. Long-term memories, things from years ago, those are usually intact. But new memories, things from the past few months or years, those might be fuzzy or missing entirely. "Will they come back?" he asked, afraid of the answer. "Some might. With therapy and time. But some might be gone permanently. The brain is plastic, though. It can adapt, form new connections, develop workarounds. She won't be exactly the same, but she'll learn to function, to compensate." That night, he sat beside her bed and told her stories. About how they met. About their first date at the coffee shop. About the time they got lost on a road trip and ended up having the best day anyway. About 1,000 small moments that made up their life together. She listened. Sometimes nodding like she remembered. Sometimes looking confused like he was describing strangers. "I'm sorry," she said at one point, tears running down her cheeks. "I'm trying so hard to remember, but it's like looking through fog. I know you're telling the truth. I know these things happened, but I can't see them clearly." "It's okay," he said, wiping her tears carefully, mindful of the healing incision under her bandage. "We'll make new memories, better ones." After a week in the hospital, she was discharged to a rehabilitation center. There, she worked with therapists every day. Physical therapy to rebuild strength and coordination. Occupational therapy to relearn daily tasks. Speech therapy to improve her word recall and processing speed. Cognitive therapy to develop strategies for her memory problems. Progress was slow. Some days were good. She'd remember something unprompted, and her whole face would light up. "I remember that," she'd say, excited like a kid. Other days were hard. She'd get frustrated trying to remember a word everyone else found simple. She'd cry out of nowhere, overwhelmed by how much she'd lost. 3 weeks after surgery, she spoke her first full complex sentence without pausing or searching for words. "I think the scrambled eggs at breakfast were overcooked." He almost cried at how normal it sounded. 4 weeks after surgery, she walked the entire length of the rehabilitation center's hallway without assistance. She was shaky and it took forever, but she did it. 6 weeks after surgery, she laughed at a joke on TV. Really laughed, the kind of full laugh he remembered from before. It was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. 8 weeks after surgery, the doctor said she could go home. She still had therapy appointments, still had a long recovery ahead, but she was stable enough to continue healing at home. Their apartment looked different when they returned. He'd cleaned everything, organized everything, put photos everywhere to help trigger memories. She walked through slowly, touching things, looking at pictures, trying to connect her current self with the person she used to be. "This is home," she said, more statement than question. "This is home," he confirmed. That first night back, she was restless. She walked through the apartment several times, unable to sleep. Around midnight, he found her standing in the hallway. She wasn't leaning against the wall this time. She was standing straight, staring at a spot on the wall about shoulder height. "What are you looking at?" he asked. "I don't remember," she said quietly. "But something happened here. Something important. I can feel it, but I can't remember what." His throat tightened. This was the spot, where she'd stood 3 weeks before surgery, where she'd whispered his name, where she'd told him she was scared. But that memory was gone now, lost somewhere in the fog of her damaged temporal lobe. "You leaned against the wall right there," he said softly. "You were scared about the surgery. You asked me to promise I wouldn't give up on you." She turned to look at him, tears in her eyes. "And did you?" "Did I what?"
Keep your promise?
"I'm here, aren't I?" She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. Then she did something that surprised him. She turned and deliberately pressed her back against the wall in the exact spot. She looked at him and whispered his name just like before, though she didn't remember the first time. "Why did you do that?" he asked. "Because," she said, "I don't remember the first time. But I want us to remember this time. I want to make new memories. Different ones, but ours." He walked to her and took her hands. They stood there in the hallway in their apartment in the life they were rebuilding together. Outside, a dog barked. A car drove by. The refrigerator hummed. Normal sounds. Beautiful because they were normal. "I'm not the same person I was before," she said. "I know that. I can feel it. Parts of me are missing and I don't know if they'll ever come back." "You're still you," he said. "Maybe different, but still you. Still the person I love." "How do you know?" "Because you're standing here. Because you survived. Because you're trying. That's who you've always been. Someone who doesn't give up." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Will you tell me stories? Every day? Help me remember who I was so I can figure out where